Check, check, check. Sound check. Seems good on my end. We've got the usual suspects in chat. See Farsight, Black Ice, Christian Lua. You just started watching episode 24, and that's great. And now we got episode 25. There we go. It's like nonstop hits. It's like Psychic Awakening release schedule. Scott Adams, welcome. Everybody, welcome. This is CanHammer TV with Custodes Tactica episode 25. I think actually there's 29 videos, but 4 of them were like special episodes or half episodes or just random rants. So full episodes, we've got 25, and we're getting up there. I think when we hit 50, we'll give away something cool. And if we ever hit 100, we're going to have to do something else. The other thing is, so 9th edition is coming up, which makes the videos all about us in 8th edition slightly less relevant. There's still some tidbits in there, and I think you can still get a lot from watching some of the games, but it would be much less relevant than it used to be. So what I'm probably going to do when 9th comes out is restart the numbering, or maybe just name it Tactica 9th or 9th Ed Tactica or something like that. But I'll keep the episode numbers going so that we can keep track of. Or maybe I'll reset it. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. But yeah, we'll see. But we're gonna have to start the unit analysis and all that again after 9th Ed. And what I might do is actually include some of these as prequel episodes, the ones where we've been talking about 9th Ed leading up to 9th Ed, because those will be interesting to keep, because they're mostly about 9th Ed. And we can look back later and see how accurate we were in our predictions about what we play and our meta, and that would be an interesting episode to look back. Sean Stryker, good evening. He's building his first Telamon. I believe he means Telamon. And I'll get it out of the way right up the bat. Telamon porn. All right, there we go. Some Telamon porn to start the episode, and we'll probably make it to the thumbnail. All right. Won't spend too much time talking about stuff tonight. We're going to have lots to talk about, and we're going to get right to it. Let's see. I see not safe for work content already. Yeah, this Telamon is very much not safe for work. Look at it. Look at a bad boy. 40K Stats Center. Welcome. I don't know if that's Val or Peter, but to start supporting CanHammer, this ad is like an hour long. And George, I sleep with the Telamon. I don't know. Do you sleep with the Telamon? You can put it in chat. It's top secret. Okay, so we got some stuff to go about. Tonight we're going to talk about the changes that have been previewed for 9th edition since our last show last week. So we're going to go through that, and then we're going to try and dissect the knowledge bombs that Brian Pullen dropped last night on us. And after logging off last night, I then rewatched the interview and went over it and listened very carefully and wrote notes and kind of tried to sum it up in themes. And so we're going to go through that. We're not going to just like go through everything you talked about. I'm going to pick out important points and themes and things that we can discuss. It's hard to do that when you're trying to do the interview and you're trying to do the interview well as well. So I got a chance to re-listen to it. And so it's pretty good. George, you hear first. He said knowledge bombs. 40K, it's Peter setting up OBS. Does that mean 40K Stat Center is going live stream? Oh, that would be sweet. VG Mazin1 bought 2 boxes of Alaris, so I'm up to 12 in Brian We Trust. Well, I gotta say, I had 4 Alaris to get up to 10, and I had painted 1. And I could not be bothered to paint the other 3. Like, I just could not. You know, I painted a lot of Custodes, and I just could not paint anymore. But after last night, I'm like, fine. I'll paint my last 3. So I'm like finishing off my last 3 guys now. So, oh my God. But it's kind of exciting at the same time, so it's okay. I'm not doing 12. And we're going to talk about a little list I'm throwing around my head at the end. Frederic Josome, sleep with twin Telamons. That's the true definition of not safe for work. Somebody got to make a Telamon emoji for the Discord. Yes, somebody get on that. Telamon emoji for the Discord. See, Farsight, I did a great job last night. I do think I did a pretty good job with the interview. See, the trick was to ask him questions that did not make him skirt the NDA issue, but yet allow him to drop knowledge on us that was very indicative. So it's kind of a how you ask the question and what questions you ask versus just coming out and saying how many CPs is the Vanguard. So I think, we did okay. So if you haven't seen last night's interview, even if you're not a Custodes player, do go back and watch it. Not right now, afterwards. It's a great interview. Brian is a super good guy, and he is a playtester, and there's a lot of insight in what he says. It was especially insightful for Custodes players, and that was the topic of the interview, but I think everybody could go and watch that and benefit from it. All right, George and Jason C., welcome. All right, so let's get started. So as of last week, we had talked about charge changes and the Lookout Sir. That was the last things we talked about last time. I think, yes. Did we? Maybe not. I think so. Yeah, I think we talked about that. Actually, I don't think we did. Okay, we'll talk about. I don't know. Did I talk about the character changes and the charge changes in Tactica before our book came out? I don't know. It was a while now because since then I've done like the crazy emergency episode and I did Brian's interview, and so anyway, okay. In terms of, we'll go over quickly. Character targeting. So the new thing is your characters have to stay within 3 inches of a unit with 3 or more models or vehicle. So that our characters are generally quite hardy. They are even more hardy now with some of the stuff we got in our book. But they can be taken down, especially if anything can shoot them, not just snipers. So I think you just have to be careful with your 3-inch distances. It's a bit dicey putting them next to a 3-man Guardian squad. 4 or 5 would be better. And of course, you can always put them next to a Telamon. I think that's a great option. And especially if you're running the Telamon up aggressively, because the Telemon's going to be extremely hard to kill, you're going to be able to protect your characters that way. And so that's a nice little Vexilla delivery method, is beside the big boy, who will keep an eye on the little guy as you walk up the field, saying, don't worry, if you die, you'll end up in one of these. There could be worse fates. Okay, so I think those are the big changes in terms of character. For us, I think that's a great opportunity. We were already good at sniping with Alaris. So I think this just increases your chances of being able to snipe someone off if they kind of left it 3.5 inches outside or something like that. So it can only be good for us. I don't think it's a huge deal for us to deal with that. You're just going to be really good at measuring your 3 inches. And it does, again, maybe point to us playing larger units versus min units. Brian was of the opinion, actually, that it's a little bit unfair because we have these 3 Guardians. There's 150 points, yet it's so dicey for it to protect a character. And that's kind of what the Custodians do. They protect. So, sure, I don't think they're going to change it just for our codex, but I think you just have to take that into account. Okay, the next change that came up is the charge change. So this was a big one. This is you have to, if you declare a unit as a charge target, if you have to make it to that unit, every unit you declared you have to make it to, otherwise you fail all your charges and you don't move. So this is a big deal. There's almost never a downside to just declaring everything so that you can possibly hit them later. And Overwatch was seldom a big deal, and now Overwatch is a stratagem. We're rarely going to see it. Most people don't feel it's worthwhile overwatching on Custodes anyway. And so you just, spread your seeds, and whatever you make it to is great, and you hedge your bets. But now you can't do that. You especially can't declare the character who's behind the screen, even if they're close, because you cannot make that charge unless you fly. So you got to be really careful about what you declare, or else you're stuck. You could fail a 1-inch charge if you declared a 5-inch charge and you roll a 4. So you got to be really careful about who you declare. It's going to make screening more effective too, because you have less screen now in order to stop people, discourage people from charging like 8 inches when they have like a 3-inch easily made charge in front of them. It also may empower heroic interventions, because people are not just going to be randomly declaring every character. And so our heroic interventions on our characters, as well as the heroic intervention strat, may become quite useful. So these are some of the nuanced changes. Now, it's hard to take this change just in isolation. So we say, okay, well, normally you would declare all these people so that, if they heroic in, or if you get to fight twice, then you get to hit somebody because you already declared them. Now, we don't know if those rules have changed in 9th. We don't know if you can only fight who you declare. We don't know any of those things. For all we know, you can fight anybody that you get into range with, just like in AOS, and so it doesn't really matter if you declared them or not. So who knows? A lot has been made about this change, and in the context of 8th, yes, but we don't know what the rules are like in 9th. And I'm telling you, everything is up for change, it seems like. Nothing is sacred. So who knows? We really need to know more to really fully understand this charge change. But it is a change and something you have to get used to. I think it helps us screen, because like a unit of 3 guys and a character is like 6 inches or 5 inches behind him, that becomes a dicey proposition to try and charge the 3 guys and also the character, even though there may be a huge amount of space there. So I think that's something to keep in mind that also helps us and maybe hinders us a little bit. Okay, we won't talk too much about the charge change right now until we find out more about the charge rules. But I think we had talked about it in the context just in general on the podcast, but we had not talked about it specifically for Custodes. I think things like bikes and Venatari, because they're fly, that might help in terms of getting through to the backfield characters, but it was always like that, so it didn't matter. But you still have to be able to make that charge now, so it's a bit dicey. We also don't know if the fly rule has changed, so we're assuming a lot, and we just don't know how accurate it is. Okay, so we don't know if the -2 to charge is still a thing on our vehicles. The Forge World book is getting rewritten, and that may go or not go. Who knows? It would be really nice, because that will make declaring that tank a real mistake, unless they're 1 inch from it and they're sure. Anything that's minus charge would become a real mistake to just throw in your declaration. And Tanglefoot now is going to really mess people. I mean, it already messed people up before. But if somebody gets a little bit greedy and wants that 4-inch charge, that 5-inch charge away, it's no problem, I'll make that. And a 1-inch charge, that's a sure charge. And you Tanglefoot that, that could be deadly. And then, of course, you can heroic. So, you've got a lot of options. And I think, Tanglefoot is becoming even better than it was. And we're going to talk about other changes coming up. But so Tanglefoot, don't forget about Tanglefoot. I know it's in the codex and not the new book, but it's still so good. Dead Geomon, I think the fly rule is going to change. That would explain what Brian was saying about Tau. Brian was putting in his funeral rites for Tau. I don't know specifically about fly or not, who knows, but yeah, I think they're gonna have to change how fly works in terms of like terrain and stuff. We'll see. Maybe we'll see a preview. Maybe we won't. Dakar and Telamon 1 runs up with the Vex Boy to give cover to Homer and Telamon 2. Okay. Definitely. Okay. So. Okay, so more reveals. Some terrain is going to be -1 to hit. So they got revealed that some terrain is going to be -1 to hit. Probably it's in my opinion, a little bit worded overcomplicated wise, but I can see why they want to do that, and hopefully lots of pictures, because I like pictures and examples. But it seems like if you can see a whole model, then it doesn't get -1 to hit. If you can just see part of the model, the whole base for a unit or like vehicle, then they are going to get -1 to hit. So there's going to be terrain giving -1 to hit. I was watching the Art of War stream today, and they had their table shrunk minus that foot, and they had their usual amount of terrain, condensed onto their 5-foot table. I gotta say, it looked pretty dense and compact. So you can imagine that if you have all these terrain and some of them are -1 to hit and cover and things like that, I think it's gonna be fairly decent. We still need the Vexilla for Homer, but we may not be so dependent on it to get our -1 to hit, which would be nice. We know it's not going to stack up to -2, so that's fine. But that means you can move your Vexilla off to somewhere else and leave a unit already having -1 to hit. So that's pretty good. We still need a Vexilla. And as we chatted about last night, -1 to hit versus +1 attack. -1 to hit still probably more generally useful against most matchups than +1 attack. So, especially if we're going to be running these massive bomb numbers, like +1 attack, while it sounds really amazing, probably overkill. So I would say probably leaning towards Magnifica still right now. And you're making Tau hit on 4s, you're making Guard hit on 4, Tank Commanders hit on 4s, everything else hitting on 5s. You're hitting Marines on 4. You're making Marines hit on you on 4s. It's a big deal. There are not a lot of shooting armies that hit on 2s, so I think it's important. And by the sounds of it, AdMag's going to blow everybody off the table, and everything you can to make them hit you a bit less will be nice. So I think Magnifica still is the Vexilla of choice, and I don't think we're gonna have squish for elite slots maybe, and maybe double Vex is not the thing, but we'll see. Okay, so we have it on pretty good authority. This is not 100%. We have it on pretty good authority that Vanguards, Spearheads, and Outriders, the specialist detachments, are 2 CP each. And that the Supreme Command will also be 2 CP, but there's another restriction on it, like a keyword sharing restriction or something. I do not have the details for that, but there has been some extra restriction on fielding Supreme Command. That will be 2, and that a battalion we already know is 3, and that a patrol detachment will be 1 CP. That is interesting. So we stack elites for our hammer units, like Terminators and stuff. Vexilla is an elite. It's not an HQ slot, obviously. The patrol has 2 elite slots, and it's because we're just so sick and tired of playing battalion, we want to start to drop that troop tax. But we may, according to Brian, we may end up going back to battalion because we need those troops to do actions and to hold stuff. Now, I think running a Vanguard we should try and avoid. 2 CP is a lot, but if you need the elites, you need the elites. Double patrol might be better. That gives you 4 elite slots, and at the cost of running an extra Guardian unit, which it sounds like maybe we need. So instead of running a battalion with 3 Guardian units, then maybe you run 2 patrols, and so you have 2 Guardian units, and you spend that extra CP. If your game really relies on you having 1 extra CP, you probably made some mistakes along the way. So I don't think that 1 CP would really swing it either way or another. And I know Chris is here always talking about Sisters of Silence. We won't talk about Sisters of Silence tonight, but I think there's not a good way of filling that. There's also indication that infantry or something like that is going to be OBSEC, is going to be what you need to hold objectives, and that OBSEC might be the thing that trumps infantry. I don't know. We don't know any of that yet, but I think if we can avoid a Vanguard, that would be useful, basically. But again, so much we don't know about missions specifically. We don't know what kind of people we're going to need in our list. So everything's just kind of up in the air right now, but nor is that CP cost confirmed. Okay, another good authority thing I've heard is that the game will be 5 turns. I think that was in the mission anyway. So it's not going to be 6 turns, and it's not going to be variable. It's going to be 5 turns, which is great. We don't need to spend any more time talking about that. 5 turns, great. So after charging models have fought, the opponent gets the first pick of non-charging units to fight. Fine. I don't think, personally, I felt like it was too much to have all your chargers go first and then you still get to pick the non-charger first. So I think this is fine. I don't think if you plan for it, it's neither here nor there. No big deal. Okay. So the new thing now is a new core stratagem for 2 CP that lets you get out of a wrap. So, and we don't know if this is replaced or what's happened to actually falling back. There's not been previewed yet, but they have this stratagem now that if you're in engagement range with enemy models, you can use 2 CP to try and get out. And so this would mean for a wrap because of what I'm about to say. So first of all, every model in your unit rolls a d6. On a 1, a model dies. So there's potential carnage there. And then the ones who are left can then do a normal move. And you can even move through enemy models. And any model that cannot get out of engagement range is dead. And then whoever's out of engagement range is fine. They're out of combat now, but they cannot do anything, including psychics. So psychics, shooting, fighting, nothing. And it says, even if you have rules that will allow you to do so. So fly things will not shoot, nothing. You just stand there, you got out of combat, you're having a breather, that's it. So this is the new way of getting out of a wrap that people had been alluding to since a couple of weeks ago. So let's look at that for a second. So if you wrap somebody, it's not assured. They can get out or die. Either way, they're out of the wrap for 2 CP. So the real cost of getting out of a wrap is 2 CP plus or minus models and or units. But that still leaves you unwrapped. Of course, that is just one use because it's a stratagem. So you could wrap 2 things. That's number 1. You could wrap 2 things. You can tanglefoot them. And considering they have to pass completely out of engagement range, most things move 6 inches. We've got 40 millimeter bases on almost all of our models. Aquilon are bigger, or Dreadnoughts. It could be actually hard for them with a tanglefoot also thrown in there to actually get out. But what does that mean? That means they would die. Okay, that's a good outcome, but maybe not the outcome that's going to stop you getting shot. So still, there's a cost, and they've spent that 2 CP, and you spent 1 CP. So you're going to have to take it as the situation develops. I think there's no downside to going for the wrap, because if you haven't killed the unit, you might as well wrap them if you can and force them to spend that 2 CP. And they either die or they get out. If you didn't wrap them, they would get out anyway and not die and not spend 2 CP. So there's really no reason not to wrap them. And then whether you want to tanglefoot or not really depends on what is the aim you want to achieve. If you want to tanglefoot them and they decide then not to get out of the wrap, then you're fine. You spent the CP to stay safe from shooting, basically. Okay, that's pretty good. If you had a stratagem that was like 1 CP, you cannot be shot this turn, you would probably like that stratagem. If you decide to tanglefoot them and they do try and get out, then they're gonna get out, whether they die or because they get out. So overall, you've won that CP race because it's all a race now. We all have the same amount of CP. So, you spent 1, but they spent 2. And the game might really devolve eventually into like who has the CP remaining, right? So either way, I think you still go for the wrap and then you decide whether you're going to tanglefoot or not. And also that depends on how much CP you have at the time and how important it is for you. It's hard to give you fast rules about that, but you should go for the wrap if you can wrap. There's no downside to doing that. There may not be much point in intentionally not killing anything to wrap now, Maybe you should just kill what you can and survive afterwards, because we're pretty good at surviving now. So you have to think about that. But if you haven't killed what you're wanted to kill and you can do a wrap, then do a wrap. And of course, we do not know how falling back has changed. So that is another big question mark that we don't know about. And that will obviously influence one's decision to spend 2 CP on this or not. So that's kind of all I'd say about that. Tanglefoot is still very good, and so I don't, Brian said last night, as far as he was concerned, wrapping was never a big part of our strategy, and we really only wrap things to not get shot, because we would just get shot off the board so easily. So maybe we don't even need to wrap these days with all our newfound defense. Who knows? We're gonna have to play and see how that goes. So maybe 2 months from now, we're all gonna decide that wrapping is for losers. We don't need to wrap because we can just kill our way out of everything. Who knows? That would be nice, because wrapping is a little bit of a finicky and sometimes contentious thing. So yeah. Okay, I generally like that change. I think it does get rid of the wrapping, which is a little bit of a, not gamey. It's within the confines of the rules, but I suspect maybe they did not feel like that is a part of the game that they want people arguing over. So they just wanted to simplify that and get rid of it. So that's fine. The rumors were right. Tri-pointing still does exist, but there is a way to get out of it. Confirmed. Prophecy. Hashtag. Okay. The another thing they leaked was the new secondaries. So they leaked a new secondary, which is basically recon with a twist. So table quarters, you have to have you get 2 victory points for being in 3 table quarters at least 6 inches away from the center. So they got rid of that whole stand in the middle in all 4 quarters business. And they also, you get 3 VP if you're in all 4 quarters. Now, of course, we don't know how many VP you're supposed to be scoring in a turn or a round or a game. So it's hard to put context into that, but it seems like a new version of Recon. It's fine. And yet another thing that centers in the middle of the board from what we heard from Brian, which we'll talk about in a second. Fuora and 286, they can also choose to use the strat and let their whole unit die if we Tanglefoot them. Sure. It's up to them. As I say, you can't. If they use the strat, you can't stop them from getting out, either by dying or by moving out successfully. So, okay. So those were kind of the things that were spoiled that we haven't talked about already. So right now we're going to go through the interview with Brian. So as I mentioned, if you haven't watched it, yesterday's episode, do go back and watch it after. It's a great interview. It's about an hour, just over an hour. And he's a really articulate guy. And he's played a lot. He's well into Custodes, just like we all are. And it's a good interview. So here are some of the things that he said, and we'll talk about them. So his general impression that I got, and that he gave for sure, was that we have lots of CP. Maybe relatively the biggest CP gain out of any faction in the game. So we've gone from having 4 to 8 CP for a whole game to going to 25 CP. And so whereas most armies have gone from 12 or 13 to 25 or 18 to less. So potentially from like 30s down to 25. So I think that is right. And we've all been fairly conservative. We don't want to spend CP on Vanguards. We don't want to do Victor Bucket. We don't want to do all these things. We got to spend our command trait. We got to spend our extra Warlord trait, maybe an extra relic. These are all the things we need. Buff the Telamon. You need CP to deep strike some things. And you need save stuff for homers. And maybe we'll do 1 homer, maybe 2, maybe 3. Do we take Trajan or not? There's all these CP balancing questions that we've had since everything came out. And so it seemed like, in Brian's opinion, that you should just use your CP. You're going to get the drip CP. If you're running a regen trait, you have a chance of regenning that drip CP into an extra CP. If you're running Trajan, he's going to give you D3 CP. So use the CP. And he was saying that he was running pre-game 2 Warlord traits, 2 Victors of the Blood games, and then the command traits. So that's 7 CP up front before the game even starts. So starting on 5 CP. So 6 first turn. So that's not too bad. And to say if you don't do anything in the first turn really because you're hiding, then you're starting the second turn, the real game, with 7 CP. That's not bad actually. So I'm don't know if I'm convinced on the double Victor yet. Maybe Victor, the character you have, is gonna get dirty, but at least one Victor sounds like it could be worth it. And if that saves you a reroll on a save later on, then I think that may be worth it again. We can certainly think about all these stratagems that we used to shelve because we just didn't have the CP for it. In terms of so that's one of the themes I got from last night, which is we got the CP, use it. And I like that, actually. Okay. He pointed out, and I asked him about what he thought were some of the challenges that we would still have in 9th edition. And so vehicles, there's going to be a lot of vehicles and monsters. And so what do we have to kill vehicles? We can punch vehicles. I think we can kill vehicles pretty reliably with a decent-sized unit of anything. 3 Guardians is going to struggle to kill a vehicle, but 5 Guardians will, or Terminators, or things like that. I think that we still lack a lot of shooting against vehicles. We have some strats to help us with shooting and combat against T7, T8. So we are definitely better at killing vehicles now than we were before the book. But we're not the ultimate vehicle killing army. So that is something to consider, and there's going to be a lot of vehicles. Is it worth noting a lot of these pregame straps could have their cost offset by the commander trait or 5 CP back. It depends on when it's used. And we don't know if that is going to change in 9th, which it might, because now everybody gets all the same CP. So they might change a lot of those things. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. George says, if game goes for 5 turns, making yourself ultra durable for 3 of them is good value. For sure. If you're unkillable for 3 or 4 out of 5 turns, and then you're out of CP or you have 1 left in the last turn, that's probably a good position to be in, because most of their army will be dead. Just before we go on, big shout out to George, who got promoted to Lock Warden on the Discord. It's just a title. And for creating the Talons of the Emperor PDF, which has all of our rules in it and FAQs and points changes up to date, including the new stuff, along with Sisters and Assassins. And so I just printed it out, and now this is all my rules in one easy to read little book. So kudos to George for doing that. If you want to download it, you gotta go on the Discord, and it's on the pinned. It's in the pins on the Custodes channel on the Discord. Okay. So one of the big bombs he dropped on us was that the table is, although there may be more terrain per space, there's going to be less cover. So he very eloquently explained how we are coming from a perspective of playing with ITC rules of block line sight first floor, and so all these runes gave us a lot of cover. But that is not going to be in the GW missions probably. And now they have whole runes that give you cover, but generally there's probably going to be less cover. So, and it may be harder to find. So that was a real knowledge bomb. That was like an aha moment, actually, because they obviously made the game for everybody. So, and we are the smaller percentage of people, us super competitive players, who needed extra rules to make the terrain work. So that's super interesting. We're just going to have to see how that goes. The terrain rules seem very fleshed out, but complicated, and we don't know the half of it. So it's hard to really comment on that. But as I said, when I was watching the AOW stream, everything is much denser and the table is significantly smaller. That foot has made a big difference. So we're going to have to travel less far to get to people. It sounds like we're just going to be sitting in the middle most of the time and people coming to us, and there's going to be a higher density of terrain, which will either give cover or minus the hit or things like that. So I think overall is going to balance itself out. But it's really hard to say right now what the full effect of that is. But that was a super interesting thing that he brought up. Board is smaller. Yeah, 25 CP, so spend it. Okay. So one of the things that we all wanted to hear was that he thinks we're going to be a top tier army in 9th. We're not even talking about 8th anymore because it's almost over and our book doesn't really work in 8th. But for 9th, we're going to be a top tier army. And I think most of us have had that impression because all the books are out now. Except for Inquisition in the next book, and Necrons and Marines will probably get some rules in the new box set, but we're going to be up there. The other bomb, of course, is that in his opinion, AdMech is way above everybody, and so I think most of the bandwagoners are going to go play AdMech actually, and not come here. But there may be decent people who start to play Custodes if we actually end up good. And I wanted to caution people not to get too good with the Telamon, so don't get nerfed. All right? We don't want it to be like the Leviathan and get freaking nerfed. So, like, wreck some face with it, but don't wreck too much face with the Telamon, okay? We don't want to get it nerfed. But, yeah, so that is great to hear. I had that feeling already. Just look at the stuff in our book and building on a solid foundation of tough units. So I think we're going to be good, so we can rejoice. Okay. But it's nice to hear that from somebody who's been playing it and testing it. Yeah, wreck face responsibly. You know, wreck face responsibly. Okay. Let's talk about the Telamon for a second. Okay. So if you watch last night's interview at around 29 minutes, we get some Telamon porn from Brian. He's got a couple of Telamons, and he thinks that the Telamon is an auto take, which I would agree. I am tried to make a list since we knew all this without the Telamon, and I've been struggling to find a reason not to take it. It is, yeah. And apparently, according to Brian, there are a few things that have yet to be previewed that are going to make the Telamon even better. So, whoa! Big Bertha's coming back. The Telamon is going to be a thing. The real question everybody keeps asking me, and C-Farce I just asked right now, 1 or 2 or 3. I don't know. I think 3 is probably too much. 2 you could probably swing. Remember, you can only protect 1 at a time. So, you know. But if... And this is something that we were talking about today on the Discord. I don't think necessarily we need to bring everything down on the second turn. I think you can drop 1 really hitty, hard-to-kill unit in the second turn, and then drop a third in the third turn. And so you're just hitting the enemy over and over again. And so if you have a couple of Telamons, you could certainly do that. You could drop 1 in, and then drop the next one in, or you could walk 1 and drop 1 in. So I don't think you want to be dread hosting 2 of them. It's just gonna cost you a crap ton of CP to deep strike them and then to dread host them in. And as we already know, 3d6 not super reliable, and you can only give 1 of them reroll charge. So I believe you can only give 1 of them. Somebody look it up. Okay. So that was really cool to hear. Super excited about the Telamon. He got so excited he had to show us the Telamon on camera. So that's awesome. I wish everybody here watching right now could show their Telamons. Okay. So he says that the missions, it's all about the missions. You know, the game is the missions. We have armies and lists and rules to play the mission. Without the mission, there's no game. And so it's really important. Until we know more about the missions, we cannot really write lists or plan, as fun as it is. And he said the missions are going to be mostly about holding things in the middle or near the middle of the board. That's the primary. And then you got secondaries to do other stuff. But if you win the primary, you're going to win the mission. And GW mentioned this. So castling armies who sit in the corner are not going to win. You need to get to the middle. And so our army is perfectly designed to do that now. To sit in the middle, be super tough, use our CP to stay alive, and just hold the middle. And can you imagine big units, stratagems to keep everything alive? You come near us, you're dead. Like, it's pretty tough to break that castle. And so it seems to play well to our playstyle. The other thing, of course, is that objectives are scored at the top of the turn, so you have to hold the objective for a whole turn. So you want hard to kill things to hold objectives, not 5 T3 3-up armor sisters girls. So now, so we are good for that, and we are able to wipe out cheap units that the opponent might put on to hold the objectives. So I think that's actually a great news for us, and probably a new kind of playstyle. Sit there, survive. People come to you, you kill them, and then move on out. It's actually pretty similar to how Brian and Richard used to play Tau, right? They move their whole Riptide drone debacle up to the middle and just sit in the middle, shoot people, and just stay there, right? And that was the secret to their success. And I've seen it in action. So that sounds good. He mentioned, and I don't know if this is a thing or not, but he mentioned that you won't be scoring primary on the first turn, which means we are going to be hiding on the first turn, which is perfectly fine. We can conserve CP on the first turn, and you can hide during Devastator Doctrine and all those sorts of things. So actually, that's probably right up our alley. And when it matters, things can come in the second turn, assuming you can deep strike in from turn 2. So I think that works perfectly fine to just hide in the first turn and don't do anything. So fine. We're kind of used to doing that already, so it's no different for us. All right, what else? Telamon is back. He thought that the double fist or the fist and gun are both excellent options, and I would agree. Some rules make it even better. Okay, so I asked him about the Forge World book because we were talking about Telamons. And so he said that the Forge World book, of course, was play tested, which is great news. We know it was written by GW and now it has been play tested as well as input into points. So I'm fairly confident now that the Forge World book will be okay. It will be no different from any of the other books that we've had released. So that is great news. Now we just have to cross our fingers for things without models to get legended. And he also was not sure if War of the Spider was written with Forge World models in mind, but has seen the crossover, and so that's interesting to know that. So he has a hunch that transports might become a thing. Who knows when it will become a thing? Maybe straight off due to vehicle spam, or maybe later. It's hard to know. And our best transport he still thinks is the Land Raider. And so he can envision some Land Raiders holding Terminator units, just drive into the middle and standing there. And then when they get popped, people coming out. That's an interesting concept. I hate the Land Raider personally, but I can see how that could be a thing. So we'll see. I have a right here that's not painted, and so it's ready to go. If I need to, I'll just spray the freaking thing gold and it'll be ready to go. But we'll see how it goes. All right, so he's playtesting right now a 12 Alaris list, and so a bunch of people have gone out and bought Alaris Terminators. Now I've been on the Alaris bandwagon a long time. I mean, the Alaris concept was the list I was playing before all this started happening, and that was 10. Just because I didn't want to buy another box of Alaris Terminators or paint them. So Alaris only got better. I think they're our best unit. So sure, I mean, 2 bombs of Alaris could certainly work. I mean, yeah, why not? I mean, you could probably, 20 Alaris Terminators is 1,400 points. That's just enough to get a patrol in there as well. But I think it sounds like one-sided armies are not going to do as well as diversified armies. So maybe you don't want to put 1,500 points into Alaris Terminators, but a big unit of Alaris is probably going to be very good. Always catch them on stream. 4 turns of scoring, blah, blah, blah. Turn one, get into position, hammer down, hold the midfield, not the Orion. The problem with the Orion is just too expensive. It's just too expensive. Yeah. Okay. So, question was asked. Alaris versus Aquilon. So, like me, he agrees that Alaris is better. They're just way more flexible, more strats. They can snipe. They have relatively similar melee output. The strength 10 does make it a little bit better, but for the extra points and the strat now that we have to give +1 to wound against tougher targets, I don't think that difference is a big deal anymore. And as people have been figuring out already, double shooting things that do 2 damage, even if it's less shots, is generally better than double shooting things that do 1 damage, especially if hordes start to disappear. So I think the Aquilon may have to take a little backseat for now. But I think they're still excellent. So don't despair. Don't throw your Aquilon in the garbage. But I think if you had to pick one or the other as your Terminator Hammer unit, I think you would be better off picking Alars. Okay. Sisters, will they work in 9th? His feeling was no. And nobody going to pay CP for a Vanguard of Sisters for soup. No. They would rather buy a Calexis. They're weak. They're easy to kill. And they have an 18-inch area of effect, which the Calexis also has, which our troops have for our stratagems and things. And so I just don't think it works. I asked Brian today, actually, because I forgot to ask him yesterday, what about Christopher Walken and Girlfriend? And he actually honestly doesn't know what's happening with them. So that's not a good sign. We're all hoping for a Day Zero FAQ. But I don't think she fixes anything either, to be honest. So I think we're going to not see a lot of Sisters of Silence in true competitive lists. But we'll see. He thinks that people like Grey Knights are not going to be able to play the way they play now because of terrain changes. I didn't quite understand that, and I didn't press him on it any further. But he doesn't think that Grey Knights being able to hide and shoot everybody with Paladin bombs is going to be a viable way of playing. And maybe some of that is about having to be in the middle now. So that's good news. That's one less reason to need to run a lot of psychic defense. Eldar is always going to be Eldar. A good Eldar player never comes within 18-inch range of denies. They're maybe going to have to keep their characters a little bit closer to their units now instead of 17.9 inches away. So I think it's going to be okay. And of course, now we nullify things like Doom and Guide. And then Thousand Suns, same thing. Good Thousand Suns player is not going to get within 18-inch bubble of anybody like a Sisters of Silence. So I just don't think it's going to be a thing. And, that's what Brian thought. Dread Host, best shield host by far. I think we've all pretty much come to that conclusion, but we're really looking for cool ways of using the other shield hosts, which is great. It's great that we have these options of trying to find other ways of playing cool stuff. And who knows, 6 months from now, we may be all playing something else because the meta has changed. But for now, it seems like Dread Host is the way to go, at least to start. And that's how it always goes after books come out. He thinks we still need the Homer, for sure. I really do not like depending on the Dread Host strat as good as it is, especially without a reroll. And so I think you still need to Homer, and ideally you Homer a unit, and then if you're going to drop on the same turn, Dread Host the second one or third one. Or, as I say, you might actually prefer dropping sequentially. That might help you, because by the time you get to turn 3, after they've been messing with a big Alaris unit for a turn, there might not be a lot left to then resist your second hammer drop, right? So I think that's a real valid way of playing. So -1 to hit versus -1 to attack banner, as we'd already discussed, probably -1 to hit has more utility. Let's see. His favorite strat is, of course, Eternal Penitent on a punchy Telamon, just cause, half damage strat he really likes, and he's not 100% convinced it's going to get FAQ'd. So that was interesting. He doesn't know, of course, but maybe they'll, as quote unquote, maybe they'll let it ride for a while. So we'll see. But that's super cool if we end up keeping the half strat. What I think would happen, though, is that everybody would start complaining about the Telamon and all these bandwagoners playing Telamons, and then it would get nerfed. So anyway. Okay. My crazy idea of using a Caladius as a sniper for the first couple of months when people forget about the 3-inch rule for characters, Alars do that better, so that's fine. I've dropped my Caladius. And in general, he thinks that the mech is not going to work very well. most of the power is not in the mech for us. The book was really towards the non-mech side of things. And while mech still has its obvious power, it just seems like it would be better to not play pure mech, or you can mix in 1 or 2 mech units. So the triple Caladius is gone. 1 Caladius, maybe 2, a Palace here and there, still good, but generally wasn't very up on the vehicles, which is fine. Meta is out the window. The missions will determine the meta. AdMech is the best army. So points. Everybody worried about the points, and he was not particularly worried about the points. There's been so many people thinking all the points are going up 20% because they've seen 2 previews that the points went up 20%. Literally, that would be the stupidest thing to do in the world. So they're going to be a bit smarter than that. Let's give them some credit. Some things are going up, some things are going down. It'd be nice if some of our units actually went down, but I suspect we'll either stay the same or go up a little bit. Now, there were no points in our book, so you can make of that what you will. But I'm a lot more reassured today than I was yesterday about points and Forge World points. So, okay, I asked him about Trajan. He thinks Trajan is still really good, but maybe not necessary. And certainly the D3CP back on like a Homer or something is really nice, but you can probably get away without it. So, yeah. So we'll see. I certainly have dropped Trajan from my list now. I had water here. Yes, that's right. And so I'm going to see what the CP crunch is like before I decide to run him again. Okay. Single biggest winner is the Telamon and then the Alaris. There we go. In his opinion, Dreadhost Battalion is his jam. He thinks that everybody is going to be running Battalion. Now, by everybody, I'm not sure if he meant all Custodes players or just everybody across the board. I certainly see no reason for other armies with cheap troops not to run battalions, but he thinks everybody's going to be running battalions because you need the troops for holding objectives and for doing actions. So we'll see, as we discussed already, battalion versus double patrol, small difference. Venatari are better, but just not good enough, and he called them a snowflake tax, a unit you would take just because you want to play your cool things, but you're just trying to make them work. So he also called some of the vehicles snowflake, the SAGs snowflake tax as well. So, and he admits he likes the SAGs, but they're snowflake tax. So there we go. Somebody make a snowflake emoji that we can use on the Discord. Get to that one. All right. As we already discussed, he doesn't think not wrapping is a big deal. And so we asked him about bikes. He just doesn't think that the bikes are good enough. Not enough benefits for the cost over all our other units now. Still harder to hide, and the density of terrain will hinder them, while the lack of cover will hurt them, and that even having salvos is probably not that necessary or makes them good. So interesting opinions on bikes. I generally got that impression as well, just from looking at all the rules and how it can apply to bikes versus other units. I mean, it just seems like they're just still that little bit too expensive, and adding salvos just makes them more expensive. Okay, then we asked him about Tau, and of course, because he is, one of the best Tau players that we know out there, and he seemed to have a little funeral dirge for Tau, that there's going to be a lot less Tau players. They're going to have to change completely how they play. No more static corner gun line. And that they're going to have to find new ways of playing. And that we're going to have a good time against Tau because we don't have to charge them anymore to win the game. We just stand in the middle and they have to come to us. We can ignore all their AP on almost all their weapons, and it's going to be a good time. So, boom. Let's have some. All right. So... At this point, he got super salty, just like we all have been, about Trajan not getting 2 or 3 damage axe and still D3 axe. Brian's my man. He got salty about Trajan and his axe when we talked about whether Trajan is still good or not. So that was a great moment. We got salty about the axe. And now, especially since we have a relic axe that does give 3 damage to some other dude, so it's like, yeah, why can't he have it? Okay, so Grey Knights talked about. Okay, so that was basically it. After we hung up, we did talk a little bit about the faction focus. So those faction focuses that have been coming out for each faction with a little rules preview for 9th. There will be one for Custodes. He wrote it yesterday, actually. And so we don't know when it's coming out. And it was very long, and they put as much detail as they want in it, but then they get edited. So he knows, for example, the Eldar one had a lot more stuff in it than what actually made the site. So we'll see what that shows. Obviously, he didn't tell me what's in the faction focus, but there'll be some tidbits in it if they don't get edited. So we'll see. So that was kind of what we talked about after the show stopped. All right. So basically, takeaway themes from the conversation with Brian. That it may be fun, but a little bit futile to write lists right now because we don't know the missions. And so we just keep that in mind. When you're in the Discord and everybody's talking about lists and what's good and what's not, at the end of the day, nobody really knows right now. So, everything is possible. Everything is viable for now. Just, take it with a grain of salt. Lots of ways to play. So we have lots of ways to play. All our units are at least decent now. Lots of different ways to play units, big, small, multiples of this, multiples of that, different combinations. So I think it's really good that the Discord is so hopping every day because there's so much to talk about and so much potential. So I think that's an amazing position to be in, versus before where it's just like, don't play that, don't play that, don't play that. This is the only way to play. That really sucks to be in that position. So that's great. It seems like if we have to pick between durability and offense, we should pick durability. And I would agree. I mean, if you die before you hit somebody, then it doesn't matter how hard you hit them. Whereas if you can survive, and our units, even when they get down to 2 or 3 man, are still doing a lot of damage. So I think the key will be durability. And I think when we talked about MSU versus large units, the key will be large units. Maybe even in the troops, like the Guardians. And so, and the last point was spend your CP. So let's go through a little list that I kicked up earlier before the show, just for funsies. Right after talking about how futile it is to write lists, but we can't all listen to our own advice. Okay, so this list I'm kicking around is basically a single battalion centered around 2.5 large hammer units. And to maximize CP usage, CP efficiency, and to play a little bit of a shock attack, sort of blitzkrieg style. Hit hard, hit really, and survive, get the morale down, tilt your opponent because they can't kill anything, and then hammer after hammer coming in. So hide first turn, hammer number 1 in, hammer number 2 in, and then if they're still alive, take it over. And so it's basically my Smash Alaris captain. So he's a captain who has Exploding Six's Warlord trait. He's got the Relic Axe and not the Exploding Six's Warlord trait, the Peerless Warrior Warlord trait and the Relic Axe. And then he is intent going to Dread Host in. And then I've got 10 Alaris Terminators, maxing it out for max effect, max shooting, max sniping, max everything, concussing everything, max everything, shenanigans, movement shenanigans, all sorts of stuff. And so that's the jam. Then I've got the Vexilla, Magnifica, Storm Shield, Turbo Shiv Vexilla. All right. He's going to be escorted up the field by a Telamon with a fist and a storm cannon. Big Bertha herself. Boom, boom, boom. Who's going to be rocking -1 to hit, half damage, mini knight stats. So go for it. Then they're also going to be escorted by 6 Guardians, all with storm shields. Being, again, -1 to hit and having transhuman and all that sort of stuff. It's a pretty tough unit. Those guys can stay in the middle. They can keep an eye on the Vexilla after he's dropped everybody. They can hold the middle. They can do actions, all those sorts of things. The Biker Cap as a utility roving captain with a salvo launcher and the CP regen trait. And the Warlord as the Vexilla with the Exploding Sixes Dreadhost Warlord trait. If you want, never mind. And then finally, a roving, maybe backfield, our own backfield or opponent's backfield or sideboard or fast-moving 5-man Venatari unit just to harass. And they all have daggers just to increase their output a little bit in combat. And that's it. That's 2,000 points. I've pinned that to the top of the Custodes channel if people want to check it out. But that's kind of the things that we're thinking of. Okay. There were some other previews today that there might be a vertical engagement range to fix the problem with monsters and buildings and things like that. They didn't mention how much that was. Maybe it's going to be like 3 inches or 6 inches. Who knows? So a vertical engagement range. They previewed dense cover, which was a very thick amount of TLDR writing. Basically, a terrain that has it that's 3 inches in height. It will give you -1 to hit, blah, 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 blah. And there's implication that you're going to need infantry to hold objectives, so maybe everything else will not be able to hold objectives. And so where does OPSEC come into it? So we don't know that yet, but that'll be interesting. And we still have an entire army that's OPSEC, so that will be nice. And Inquisition, which is... yeah. Okay. That is it. Questions in the chat? I'm going to the Discord questions. If you're not a member of the Custodes Discord, the CanHammer Discord, and you want to be, then just join that link right there. Come join our community. It is bustling right now, and it's a great place to be right now. Super positive. Lots of good players with lots of good insights on the Discord, talking all the time about Custodes. So join us. It's awesome. Shout out to all the patrons, or as I call them now, the shield captains, for supporting the channel. The patronage is very much appreciated. It helps us pay for equipment and things to televise and have good quality audio and video. So thank you very much for all the support. And shout out to everybody on the Discord for making all these things worth doing. Okay, let's go to the questions. Okay, let me scroll up. Okay. After Brian's comments, Land Raiders, are we going to start taking them? Why not? As I already said, you can try everything. So try some Land Raiders. I think, 1 or 2 Land Raiders can be decent, and now they can shoot and they can't get bad touch. So go for it. How do we deal with vehicles? So, I think you have something. If you have a lot of vehicles and you're struggling, then maybe run the double gun Telamon. He deals with vehicles very well. Or be a bit more aggressive on your drops for your hammer units, things like that. So AdMech is going to be a real test. They have a really good selection of vehicles that all can shoot all the time now. It's going to be a real test. Start the Telamon on the board or deep strike. Well, one of the things I've been constantly bumping into now is that 1,000 point barrier for deep striking. And so, because, the bad boy is not that cheap, and then you're running a big hammer unit that's like 400 or 500 points, you want to drop a captain. And so you run into the 1,000 point deep strike limit pretty quickly, assuming that that's still a thing. So I don't think there's any problem with walking your Telamon forward, moving 8 inches, maybe even advancing. Being a bodyguard for your Vexilla. I think there's nothing wrong with that, and it saves you a CP as well from not having to deep strike him. Best loadout, I think still the most flexible loadout is fist and gun. But Punchimon is fine too. If you have a lot of other stuff to shoot and you don't need the Shootimon, you can do Punchimon or you can take double gun. The problem with double gun is that you can get Tarpon in combat. You rely on your shooting to get you out of combat. Okay. The Stoic. What do you think of the example terrain that was previewed by GW for the table should look like? I think it was a little bit uneven and sparse. And their terrain is just like, it doesn't block anything, their terrain. So, yeah, I didn't like their table. When we finally do open up the stream, you will see what I feel like a table should be. Okay, strengths and weaknesses of other non-Alaris hammers. That's a big question. I think they all have their strengths. Aquilon's strength, obviously, they hit harder in melee. They have pretty good horde clearance. But their weaknesses, that's all they do. So that's one, and they're expensive. Bikes, I think we already talked about. Expensive. They're more expensive for guns that might do anything. Hurricanes may not be doing very much. They're going to have to dodge around terrain, and there's going to be much denser terrain. So it's the same problem that I had with bikes in this edition. And more difficult to hide. Venatari, yeah, they're still just a bit flimsy, Like, you bring down, you better kill what's going to kill them, because otherwise they're going to be dead. And so it's still a decent point commitment. I think fly infantry is going to be amazing, so who knows? We need to see the missions to know how good Venatari are going to be. And Guardian Bomb, I still think is very good, but I think we need the Guardians to do stuff like holding and action, so I still think you run like a big unit of just shields that can just stand there and not die. Thoughts on including Hector Rex or Calexis instead of SOS? I personally don't think we need to include any of those, but we'll see. We'll see what happens to the Psychic Heavy armies. Trajan or no Trajan? I've taken Trajan out for now. I want to see how the CP efficiency and goes without his D3, because if I don't need the D3, I don't need Trajan. I got so much hitting that Smash Captain will do more damage than Trajan probably. So yeah, I just don't. I don't think it's necessary unless we're really going to be struggling for CP, which remains to be seen. Yeah. Okay, what's our best way of dealing with screens? I don't think there's going to be too many screens that we can't deal with, man. Like, even like 6 or 7 Guardians with Sentinel Blades might kill some easy-to-kill screens, like Guardsmen and stuff like that. Certainly, if you homer down 3 inches from a screen, you'll clear that screen easily. You don't have to drop all your hammers. If you want to walk up turn 1 or turn 2 with 7 Shield Guardians and 10-man Alaris unit, like, you're just spending a few extra CP to keep them alive an extra turn, and those guys will clear a bunch of screens. So, yeah. So, and if the point of the game is to stand in the middle of the table and wait for the opponent to come to you, who cares about screens? Who knows? We don't know what the missions are going to be like. How do you kill infiltrators reliably? Punch them. What part of 9th that's been previewed so far do you think helps us the most aside from the new CP system? That's a great question. I think actually the smaller table size is going to help us the most. Now that I've seen it, I need to actually like set up my table with the 1 foot gone and kind of get a real life visual. Maybe I'll do that for the next episode. But like, I'm just cutting off like a foot right now in front of me, and it's like it feels significantly smaller. So I think that's going to be a big change. And the missions, obviously, the missions. Can you homer if a Vex gets out of a transport? No. Any clue on power of the machine spirit? I don't know what's going to become. We don't know. How to make the Land Raider great again? Play it. Cronus versus Land Raider. I don't know. I can't remember how much the Cronus costs. I have a feeling if the Cronus is cheaper, then the Cronus is better because it's fly. But because I think it's also T8. So I haven't looked at it in a long time. 18 wounds, something like that. So, yeah. So, I don't know. Whichever one's cheaper. Way cheaper. Okay, so I don't see a reason why you'd run a Land Raider then, unless you need the last cannons. What unit in 9th will see more time on the shelves than on the battlefield? Bikes or Wardens? Oh, that's a great question. You know what? I think bikes are going to see play. First of all, because people want to play bikes again. And I tell you what, like, if you want to spend the points on like a 9-man bike unit, that unit is going to survive. So I think bikes will see more play just because people, especially casually, will just take bikes, 3, 4, 5 bikes, and they're going to be good because they are better than they were. There's no arguing that bikes are better. They did not go worse in any way. They just got better because they got strats. The Wardens are probably going to be a little bit more useful because of infantry. And that's about it. Infantry, terrain, interactions, I think, and you get more models for way less points. So I think Wardens still have some play as a relatively cheap hammer. They just don't have the utility that Alaris have. And now, especially since some of the stratagems are Terminator locked, that really locks out the Wardens from those. So yeah, I think people were still going to play Warden bombs. 6, 7, 8 Wardens is feels a lot better on the wallet of point wallet. But I think bikes may see more play than Wardens, and probably more people have bikes than Wardens, especially more casual. People just sort of gravitated towards the bikes when the book first came out, and so more people have more bikes than Wardens. And people who play competitively probably definitely have more bikes than Wardens because they all spent lots of money on 18 bikes right at the beginning. So yeah, I think Wardens will be better, but bikes are gonna probably see more play. Okay. Now that Battalion seems to be a go-to, is a squad of Sagittarium worth it? I think Sagittarium have not gotten anything to make them better, and everything else has gotten so much better around them. So I don't see any reason to take Sagittarium right now. Everything else even shoots better than Sagittarium right now. So, and you can only take them in max of 5 or 6. So, yeah, Sags are the snowflake unit right now. What will be the size and composition of guard squads? I think guardians are going to be our action and objective holders. So I think you put shields on them. I don't think that's changed really. They have to be the guys who survive and just hold space and do stuff, do actions. Everything else we have can kill stuff. And don't forget, other things that we have can also hold things. So, it's not like Guardians are the only people that can hold an objective. We're all OBSEC, so that's fine. So I think you're still running Guardian units with shields because you don't want them to die. What are the viable soup options? No soup options. Don't play soup. I could see why people would want a soup before, for all the reasons that people want a soup. There is real disincentive now to soup. And no real good reason to soup anymore. So, yeah, I don't think you should soup. With the success of the Space Marine supplements, could we see supplements for other factions? Dark Mechanicus, Traitor Legions, most obvious choices. Who knows? I don't know. It's possible, I guess. Yeah. What's the best... like, the Space Marines weren't really supplements. They were... the actual chapters, like they're actually whole armies really in and of themselves, and for some reason they separated Dark Angels and Space Wolves and Blood Angels, but I mean, yeah. What's the best army to buy with the money I made from selling my Custodes? I just sold anything. Nick. Last call for questions. How do you see melee bomb Custodes being viable against gun lines with the get out of rap free stratagem? Well, we already discussed this in detail. It's not get out of rap free, it's get out of rap for 2 CP and possible dying models. So I don't think there's any getting around it. We already discussed. What are the biggest weaknesses of our army? And so we kind of already discussed that too. Okay, so that is where we are at right now. All right. So, thanks very much for watching, guys. Super appreciate everybody following and subscribing and contributing to the channel and to the Discord. If you're a Custodes player and you haven't done so yet, check out the rest of the Tactica series. This is episode 25, so there's 24 other episodes to watch. This is the link to the Discord channel. Do join and join our community. It's a bustling, amazing community. Last-minute Telamon porn. And we will see you guys next time. So the rest of this week, I have so many commitments. We're not able to stream the rest of this week. But next week, we'll be back with a full schedule. So